Several candidates are competing for an open seat on the city council in the district currently represented by Andrea Campbell. The district includes parts of Mattapan and Dorchester and some adjacent areas in Rosendale and Jamaica Plain. Our guest is a longtime advocate who has also worked as an early childhood educator. We'd like to welcome Josette Williams. Thank you very much for being with us, Josette.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I appreciate being here.
Josette, talk to me a little bit about your experience, where you've lived, and I think it's in several places, and what you've done in your work.
Well, thank you for asking. I always start out by saying I'm Brooklyn born, Chelsea raised, and Dorchester developed. And I have spent over 30 years working in health and human service, juvenile justice, and more recently, my stint in early childhood education at the Boston Public Schools. And so my work really stems from ensuring that community organizing is always at the forefront of the work, that it always involves community. So from East Boston camps way back when, as a young person growing up on the Chelsea East Boston side, all the way up into recently in the past 10 years working with the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, Boston Medical Center around creating Vital Village Network, and then more importantly, creating what I love is Advocacy First Teacher Boston. It's an advocacy program for families who are driving the work to really get their kids into school and having them ready, addressing the achievement gap from the forefront of what they believe their children need, deserve, and building that social capital. So, yeah.
You sound as if you've accomplished quite a bit already. Why decide to take this to another level by running for city council?
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. I think when you talk about accomplishments, I think the goal is to always each one teach one, to connect to as many people as possible so that people themselves see that they are truly the change agents on the ground, that I was just given an opportunity to lead. I was given an opportunity to build with families on the ground. And because I believe that truly has been successful, I think my voice is a voice that, particularly considering the past year that we've had, that folks need folks they can really connect with, folks on the ground who have lived experiences that have been challenging for folks to get through. So I am someone who has navigated these spaces personally, but has helped families see that they are truly the power, and they have the power. What they really need is the resources, they need the access, and they need the opportunity. So given informed information, given education, given those opportunities, they can make those changes on their own. I just want to make sure that we have the ability to really scale that and do that block by block. So I think it's important that I am that voice that has been able to do it and can bridge it on a scalable level of the district.
One thing I noticed about your campaign is that we have a lot of candidates talking about dramatic change right now. Your focus is a little different from that. How would you describe it?
Well, thank you for noticing that, Chris, because I think that what we do know is that City Council, really, their role is constituent services. Their role really is about bridging community and ensuring that the way we live on the ground has the momentum that folks can believe in our government and believe that our government is working for them. And so when we look at, like, for instance, the voting block, in my district, it's pretty low. And so that can mean several different things. Folks are only coming out when they truly believe in a candidate who can really spark their interest and believe that they can help to resolve some of those issues or work with them to resolve them. But most importantly, that civic engagement is to understand how important government is to work for you. And so getting out the vote means really ensuring that folks get out here and register so that they're not disheartened. Right? They're not disheartened in government, and that they learn about how policy really impacts how we live. If we spend, 10,000, I'm sorry, that's if we get 10,000 people out to vote, there's still 60,000 folks who haven't. And so I think it sends a message to government about where you sit in your district and how important your neighborhoods are or are not to you. And I think by by getting to the ballot, that is the strongest tool we have to let our government know we are here, our lives are non-negotiable, and you are to not only consider us, but our voice is important as a part of whatever decision you get to make. And council, right, is struggling with power, right? What power do they really have? And so I think the more community understands the role, understands what powers we do or don't have, they can start helping to fight for the things that they believe that the council should have in order to make their districts and their communities better.
Well, for years, people have been hearing promises of getting to universal access to early education. It's been a long wait. Do you see yourself doing anything about that as a counselor?
Absolutely. And I'm a proud person who sits on the board of Universal Pre-K right now. I'm someone who works in early childhood. I attend morning meetings with strategies for children. I think it is extremely important to think about how early childhood is not just a family issue. It's not an individual person issue. It's an economic issue. In order for folks to get back to work and afford childcare, we really need to think about getting our kids high quality education and affordable, frankly. And so for me, it's about sitting at the table right now, ensuring that 3-year-olds, that we expand those seats. We like the younger we can get our kids into early education, the better, but quality education, right? And families who are making $8 an hour, they can't afford $28,000, $30,000 a year for childcare. So we really need to think about these funds coming in, how we supplement that across the board. Every child should get high quality start of education. We know that's where it begins. We know that when we're building those blocks for an achievement gap, it starts in kindergarten, at birth. So if we're not creating spaces in our communities for providers to have quality educators, safe spaces, and people need to have spaces right where they live. So they need to be able to afford it as well. So that's what I'll be pushing for: affordable care, high quality care, and really bringing those numbers down more and more every year, from 3-year-olds to 2-year-olds. The earlier we can get them into high quality care, the better.
A lot of people in the city were strongly shaken by one event in this district. That was the fatal shooting of Dolores Brown, a grandmother who just happened to be in the middle of things when somebody fired shots. You were heartbroken by that. What needs to be done about something like that?
Chris, I wish we all had like the silver bullet answer to what we can do about violence, right? We know that it exists. We know that it's in our communities and it plagues us. And it is absolutely heartbreaking. But I think this is where we go back to what community policing really used to look like on the ground, and relationships in our communities, understanding that we have not officers just showing up after things happen, but where are we in the community already working side by side with community police officers to really bridge and build relationships so that folks are able to talk to police about what's going on and who's in our communities and where the trouble is existing way before these types of shootings take place. They're completely unfortunate and absolutely, like you said, heartbreaking. But I think when we think about violence, there's no one ticket answer, but I know that we have to work together to build a partnership and thinking around how we build these relationships, how we come up with solutions of change together. And we have seen across the nation where quality community policing, putting people in our community that really work on these issues, whether it be street workers or mental health workers, we need people in our community that we can confide in, work with, and build those relationships to challenge what safe spaces look like in our communities.
You've expressed concern about over-policing and use of force in the community as well. What needs to change? I know some things have changed recently, but anything in addition to that you think needs to change?
Well, I think it goes right back to what I was saying. I think when we talk about policing, I think I would change the word to partnership, right? Because at the end of the day, you want officers in your community that you can confide in. You want officers who you can go to, that you believe truly have your best interests in mind. But there's also things that need to be done on the other side. Our people are being hurt and killed by officers. So that means training. That means understanding the community that you're working with. And some of the responses that police are being called to may not need policing response. It may need professionals in our community that really are working around mental health issues. We've seen a huge uptick, which is another one of my big R's, I call them, in my recovery, is that mental health in our communities are struggling, right? And social emotional wellness. We need professionals in our homes, in our schools, in our workplace, in our communities, where we can constantly address how we're living, the stress of how we're living, the fear of how we're living, because these things can't be blanketed by, oh, let the cops come and resolve them. We need resolve in our communities way before police show up. And so we don't need folks who are coming in who feel like their only job is to arrest. Protect and serve has to be the front and forefront of what they're doing. But even before that, when they're walking into our communities and they're walking around our communities, we don't need to see them as a threat, but we've got to know who they are. We got to know that they're trained. And frankly, as a community, we got to know how they're showing up in accountability, right? We're talking about transparency and accountability. That means let us know how our communities are better with having these folks in our communities, and what kind of strategies that are coming up collectively to ensure that those numbers are going down from how we're being pulled over to how we're being addressed and spoken to. When we've got a complaint, how do you inform the community that those complaints have been addressed, right? And that you bring back that information to the community around what the resolution was to how those interactions happen. Because people got to know that there's been momentum and there has been change, not that it elusively goes off into some complaint box somewhere and maybe it was addressed or maybe it wasn't. You've got to have that transparency back to community.
Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Chris, so much. This was fantastic. I hope I get to come back again.
We'll try to keep up with things if you're certainly one of the finalists. And thank you. Nice to meet you too as well. City Council candidate Josette Williams, she's running in District 4. We'll have more news in just a moment.